Hey y'all, so before I get started, there is something I want to quickly get out of the way. This particular interlude may seem a little bit like a hit piece, but I want to say explicitly this is not meant to be aimed towards any person and or persons in any shape, form, or fashion. Like all interludes, this is an expository stream of consciousness meant to kind of create a conversation, and if you can relate to it, maybe you can have a conversation with various individuals or maybe even yourself. That being said, on with the episode. Our lives are in a constant state of flux. There's no denying or doubting that. And I often look at life as kind of like a set of scales. And they're constantly shifting. They're constantly going out of whack. So to balance and rebalance our scales of life, we're adding things, we're subtracting things, or we're replacing things. Anything to cause that shift, to balance them, to make life not easier for us, but more manageable for us. And we're adding new things, we're subtracting new things, we're replacing certain things. And I'm not just talking about we're subtracting work stress, or we're going to add new hobbies or ways to please our partners, things like that. In a lot of cases, we're subtracting relationships. And that's where this interlude is coming into play, because I want to take a moment to talk about relational drift. Now, I'm not really talking about natural relational drift, because that's exactly what it is. It's natural. Things happen in life to balance our scales, and relationships just naturally kind of come apart. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about professional relationships, familial relationships, and just friendly relationships. And there's nothing wrong with natural drift. And I want to give you a big example of natural drift, because it impacts me personally. My relationship with Harkov. He is one of my oldest friends, and he's one of my best friends. We've been friends for, I want to say, almost 20 years now. We lived together for 5 years. I was the best man at his wedding. But of course, like life, he moved away, I moved away. He's got a family, a growing family, and we don't see each other like we used to. However, that doesn't mean that I can't contact him for anything, and vice versa. And we still swap jokes, we still do things. It's just we're not as present as we were previously. The same thing can be said with college or university relationships. And I'm not just talking, once again, about romantic, people we used to live with, people we used to have classes with, people we used to pal around with or party with on the weekends. We drift away. We move aside. That's natural relational drift. It's not like we just cut the cord, roll credits. It happens, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I still am friendly with various people I went to college with. It's just, once again, it's not like it used to be. That's what I mean by natural relational drift. However, the other side to that is what I really want to get into, and that is what I call forced relational drift. Now, forced relational drift, once again, pretty much what it sounds like. However, it's not as black and white as you might think. I feel like forced relational drift is a permanent gray area. And somebody looking in from the outside might see it as just black and white, clear cut, this is done for reasons A, B, C. And actually, no, there's a lot more moving parts and a lot more gears and weights and things that are being done to rebalance and balance our scales of life. Now, just kind of to go into a little bit about what I mean by forced relational drift is pick a relationship. Doesn't matter what type it is. Once again, professional, familial, friendly, romantic. There's a whole spectrum surrounding that. But you're in a relationship that is causing one or both party scales to become grossly unbalanced, grotesquely unbalanced even. And it's not like you've not tried to balance or rebalance that scale alone. But while you're trying to balance that scale, your own scales are becoming out of whack. Your own scales are unbalanced, and to the point it can be even detrimental and damaging, not just for the world around you or the people you deal with on a more regular basis, but yourself as well. And it's kind of, looking back on it, the writing's usually on the wall 10 feet high and in bright neon paint, but you still want to do something to retain that because it's doing something for your scale. What? You don't know. But after a while, you have to rebalance your personal scale, and that's where you're forced to cut that relationship adrift. You're forcing that to drift apart, separating the wheat from the chaff, as it were. And I'm not saying that it's easy, but I feel like in any form of relational drift, it's a short-term gain versus a long-term gain. And this is where it gets the gray areas, because it could be a short-term pain for a long-term gain. It could be a short-term gain for a long-term pain. It's all about what the relationship dynamics are. But it's not saying that it's not damaging. And I do want to say that all of us, myself included, are guilty of forced relational drift. Whether we are the ones that led to the relational drift or we are the ones that instigated it for one reason or the next. However, this is such the gray area proceeds, is that I feel like a lot of types of people look at forced relational drift as an easy way out. And there's a lot more involved in that. Yes, there is a contingent of douchebags that, force relational drift for their own benefits, whatever that may be. And that's not excusing them for the process, but the general collective of us, usually if we're engaged in forced relational drift, there's usually a deeper underlying meaning. So let's just talk a little bit about what kind of relational drift there is. I think the easiest way to kind of consider forced relational drift is ghosting, I guess you could say. Now, obviously ghosting has such a negative connotation affixed to it, and I'm not denying the fact that going the route of the ghost is not damaging, because it is damaging. But I want to talk a little bit why most people, I'm not saying everyone, most people go the route of the ghost. It's, for me personally, because I am guilty of going the ghost route. I've done it several times, and am I pleased or proud of myself that I've done it? Hell no. I am not excusing myself from doing that. However, there's more moving parts at work, because I feel like somebody that has to instigate the forced drift, it's almost like they've had to make their decision with the back of the wall. They've tried so many different ways to balance that relational scale. And by constantly rebalancing the relational scale, their own scales have been neglected. And one way is shifting in the other way, and it's impacting how that person is functioning, not to just others, but to themselves. And that's where the damage comes into play, is because that damage is often overlooked. Because, let's face it, we want to be confident. We all want to appear to be confident, or secure, or stable, or, machismo, in a lot of cases. So we hide. We put our own self-preservation on the back burner for the benefit of that relationship. And a lot of times, it's a one-way street. I'm not saying it's the only reason that relational drift comes into play. There's a lot more at work. But from what I can put myself into the shoes as someone who has instigated relational drift, it's because, for me personally, I feel like I'm the one carrying the brunt of it. And once again, this is in a myriad of examples in a spectrum. And after a while, my own skills, as y'all know, who watched the project for a while, my own skills are, I think, permanently out of balance. But it can't just be one person. So when we feel like we've exhausted all other routes, conversations, not even ultimatums per se, but, come to Jesus moments, and those still don't work, what more can be done? And I feel like that's where going the route of the ghost is kind of a last resort. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of people out there like, oh, well, why don't you just have a conversation like a reasonable adult? Not everybody has the capability to have a conversation, or maybe they thought they've tried and it's gone unheard. And relational drift has to get forced to fix our own selves. And once again, this is part of the gray areas because both parties are affected by forced relational drift. The person that caused it, the person instigating the drift, which may be one and the same person, we don't know, it's contingent upon the relationship, and the person at the receiving end. It's felt by at least one person, if not both parties. And I want to say 75 to 80% of the time, it is felt by both parties. Maybe not immediately, but it is felt. And the big question is why? Why do we force relational drift? As I've said before, my biggest example that I can relate to is my back is to the wall. I am emotionally saturated. I am burnt out. And I've tried to rebalance the relational scale with my own scale. But any relationship, as I've said in numerous other interludes, it's a two-way street. Person A and person B. And that is the scale, is to work together to keep that scale in sync. And if one scale is tipping in favor of the other one or is becoming two-way down, that's when the relationship has to be scrutinized. And that's when you have to realize what the balance is. Who's doing the balancing? Is it both parties? Is it one party? We don't know. But the reason I'm talking about this is because I see a lot of people talking about their own relational drift, or how they've had to force relational drift, or how they've fought tooth and nail to balance a relational scale, and it's come up nil. And it's tough, particularly if you're emotionally invested in a relationship. Let's just face it, no matter where in the spectrum you are, you're invested. It's the way it is. It comes with a territory. No one with a 2-digit IQ or a 3-digit IQ will say, oh, well, you know, this relationship I wasn't invested in. But I feel like for those that cause the relational drift, they often get a bad rap for, you know, going the ghost or just saying, peace out, I've done my best, whatever. Because for myself personally, if a relational drift occurs with somebody, a forced one, not a natural one, it's... How do I voice this? For me personally, it's about processing. It's about parsing. It's about trying to come up with that happy medium to balance our own skills. Because at the end of the day, we are the ones that we have to live with ourselves. We are the ones that have to wake up in the morning, look at ourselves in the mirror, and say, where am I? Where am I? Where are my scales? How am I doing? Because when we get around to that, our skills are immediately going to become out of balance. From work, to love, to family, to friends, to hobbies, to habits, to vices. Everything is going to cause our skills to teeter one direction or the other. There's no denying that. But for me, when I reach that point of saturation, I need time to stop. I need to just gather my thoughts and parse and think about what's going on. And sometimes it doesn't do it. We're still being blasted with this outside interference from expectations and anticipations and needs, wants, and manipulations, maybe even some cases. And no matter what we do, at least in my case, to balance all the skills that I have in front of me, there's always still that outside noise that I've tried to stop, that I've tried to put the brakes on, and maybe it works a little bit, maybe a little bit of affirmation comes through, but let's face it, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's a proven fact. So, in some cases where I've had to force the relational drift, it's because I'm shattered. I'm emotionally done. And conversations have gone the way of the dodo, and there's no turning back. The proverbial Rubicon has gotten crossed. And that's just the point. I'm like, I need to think. I need to process. And I'm not saying that when forced relational drift happens that the doors are permanently closed. There is always a way to come back and try to say, here's why I did what I did. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm feeling. However, like any relationship, it's a two-pronged system. It's bilateral. Any relationship, no matter what the characteristics are or the parameters, it's bilateral. And if one set of the side of the scales is not working to balance the other, then something has to be looked at. Something has to be dealt with. And if those scales continue to be out of balance, I'm not saying it's a great thing to force relational drift, but if it preserves your own emotional well-being, it's a short-term pain for a long-term gain. And it sucks. But for me, if it allows me time to process, it allows me time to see what my own scales are doing, it is beneficial. And it also depends on what the value of the relationship was. What did you mean to the other person or persons? Take a long, hard look at yourself. What do you think you brought to the table? Well, not even what do you think. What do you know you brought to the table? And what did they bring to the table in return? If you are the one carrying the torch 90% of the time, or we'll take it even lower, 65 to 70% of the time, then that is probably a good reason why it has to go the way of the dodo. Now, obviously, in relationships, people are going to do more, people are going to do less. But that's situational. But what I'm talking about is if you are the one that's doing it the majority of the time and the outside interference is causing you to doubt yourself, for your skills to become almost permanently unbalanced, you have to do it. And sometimes they want to hold on to it because they think everything's hunky-dory, or maybe they're getting something out of it. Or maybe you're getting something out of it and they want to cut loose. You know, there's always something about that, but at the end of the day, we are the ones we have to live with ourselves. And I mean, I'm not saying that it's easy, but because there's been recent relational drifts that I've had to instigate or that I've allowed to go the way of the dodo. And I'm not saying it's affected me, and I know possibly it's impacted those around me. But I know there's others in similar situations to me. And relationships, a true relationship, is balance. It's give, it's take, it's light in the darkness, or if you're in the dark place, they're being the light, or sharing a joke. It's not about you being the sole carrier of it. And I'm not saying that it's a good thing to do forced relational drift, because it's not. Because, like I said, the damage is done. But there's no shame in it. Unless you're a douchebag and you're doing it for some sort of benefit for yourself, in which case then, you can just sod off. But if you've tried, or if they've tried, and there's been some attempt to rebalance the scales, and it still doesn't work, then it's almost expected. But like I said, there's such a gray area. So why am I talking about all this? Because like I said, people are hurting and relationships are suffering, particularly in the current state of affairs the world is. But it's time to step up the game, all of us. And if there is somebody you care about at any end of the spectrum, that's awesome. But take a long, hard look at yourself as well. Think about it. What is the relationship benefit for you? And what are you doing for the other party? And if that scale is all kinds of out of whack, it's time to cut the cord. It's time to move on. And it's because if your scales are unbalanced, you cannot balance any other scale that you are encountering, whether professional or personal. Take it from somebody whose scales are constantly, like I said, are constantly out of whack, are constantly unbalanced. Do I know if I'm ever going to be able to rebalance them? I couldn't even tell you guys. I'll be honest. But I do know at the end of the day, my skills are temporarily balanced for me to actually attempt to sleep. And for those that I have heard, yes, I do apologize for forcing it. But it's never too late, like I said, to reopen those doors and re-establish some form of communication. But it has to be beneficial to both parties, and it cannot be one party asking you to come back, because if the damage is done, then it has to be discussed. There has to be some form of mitigation to prevent that from unbalancing. So at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself the conversation piece. And I pass this off to you. What are the benefits to every relationship you're in? Short-term, long-term, professional, personal. What's the benefit? And what do you do to rebalance your personal skills versus the other skills of your life? And only you can answer that question. Same as I'm the only person that can answer that question for me. But if you know somebody that is currently in an unbalanced situation and relational drift may be happening, or it may be a good reason to, yeah, have that conversation. Make that person understand that they're not alone, and that if these things happen, it's okay. For the most part. But hopefully the people that have these conversations know they're not interacting with various douchebags. But that's where I want to go with this. And if I'm rambling, it makes perfect sense. It's been a crazy couple of weeks. Obviously, my voice is not the greatest. It's probably going to get worse. Shocker, I know. But focus on yourself. Focus on your scales. Because if your scales are balanced, then everything else will be. I can promise you that. And at the end of the day, believe in yourself. Or try to. Because I believe in you.